Welcome everybody to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, first I'll be having a conversation with my occasional guest, Nick, regarding this week's finale of Better Call Saul. And I have some more things to say about it. I still had my issues, my slight disappointment that I registered in the instant reaction from earlier this week. And I go into that in a little more detail, although still positive on the episode overall. And do check out that episode review and breakdown with Sona from earlier in the week, if you haven't already. Then we continue this musical daisy chain that Ian and I have been building, following up on our conversation with my segment where I draw parallels between Bruce Springsteen and David Bowie's careers. This is a longer segment than I normally try to put in for music here. We try to keep it in the 10 to 15 minute range. This one goes long, but these are two long careers with lots of intersections over a very long period of time, so it's longer, so do indulge me. I did think it came out very well. And then we're back with Nick and Ray as well, talking about the latest episode, talking about the new Marvel show, She-Hulk, which I was surprised to find I thought was very entertaining, and also surprised that I also bristled at the fact that they make some interesting choices to kind of accelerate her abilities, and we talk about that in great detail. And of course, whenever I have Ray and Nick on, they have to talk about Star Wars. So they do digress into bashing the most recent Star Wars trilogy. But that's all the way at the end of the episode. So if you do decide to hang around to hear it, you can enjoy it at the end. It's actually kind of funny. So I did enjoy it. So I did decide to keep it in the episode. But before then, we do talk about She-Hulk and also the direction of the MCU with the many, many projects that were announced recently. Their next cycle of films, very ambitious, which culminate with 2 Avengers films in 2025. So stay tuned for all of that. Do check the show notes for timestamps if you do want to hop around. We do, as a warning, spoil the most recent trilogy of the Star Wars films. And of course, we spoil this one episode of She-Hulk. We do assume you have watched it. And of course, spoilers for the season and series finale of Better Call Saul. If you haven't watched that yet, don't listen to our conversation. So with all that out of the way, and just a few show notes, we will be beginning coverage of the new Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon, and that episode should be out on Monday. Sona and I will be discussing this entire season of Only Murders in the Building, and that episode will be out later next week, along with this conversation with my sister, where we're probably going to, I think, be talking about The Rehearsal from HBO, the Nathan Fielder show, which just wrapped up tonight. I'm actually recording this on Friday night. Have not watched it yet, but it has been interesting, and I just wanted to talk to Nathan Fielder in general, and I have just introduced Nathan Fielder to my sister via Nathan For You, and of course this Rehearsal show, and it's wrapping up, as I mentioned, this weekend, so we will probably be discussing that as well next week. So subscribe so you know when all that becomes available. And I've mentioned and as I've mentioned before, if you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest way to do that is to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcasting platform you happen to be using. You can also email us, needsomeintroduction@gmail.com. We do enjoy hearing your feedback. And of course, most importantly, recommend us to anyone who you think might appreciate the conversation. Or dig into our catalog and look at other conversations in the past that might be interesting to you, maybe shows you've been catching up on, or maybe just recommendations you're looking for. You can always check our back catalog. I always have recommendations along with the main reviews. Let's get into the conversations. All right. So Nick, we got you back on, and I know you've been watching Better Call Saul. The whole thing wrapped up this week. The last episode, actually, Vince Gilligan wrote and directed last week's episode, which I liked very much. This current episode, this was written and directed by Peter Gould, the showrunner. Yep. And the main writer for Saul back in the Breaking Bad days. So this is kind of more of his baby than Vince's. I mean, obviously, they have a writer's room, so they had sketched this all out, but then they get to write those individual episodes themselves. And this was the big wrap-up of the show. And how'd you like the episode in and of itself, but also as a wrap-up for this whole entire show? What'd you think?
Liked the episode and thought that the show wrapped up well. I mean, you were kind of hoping that he'd be able to get away, but he had to answer for what he had done, not only in Better Call Saul, but also in Breaking Bad. And, it was the right ending because most of the characters that had broke bad or were bad, because he was always slipping Jimmy, they never saw any jail time. They either got killed. I was hoping he wouldn't get killed,
Yeah.
so I was happy about that. And in Kim's eyes, he atoned for what he had done, I guess, as best as he could, right? And I thought it was a nice way to wrap it up. I think it was I guess the happiest ending you could get given the circumstances for him. But it almost seemed like the trigger for him, because he was going to get away with the 7 years, which I
Right.
thought was great. Like that was a
Yeah.
really cool
That's
twist,
when he's in full Saul mode.
full Saul mode. But I think the trigger for him was when he found out that Kim had already confessed to everything that
Yep.
happened to Howard. That sort of triggered him to not necessarily come to his senses, but sort of to come back to the Jimmy persona
Yep.
and leave Saul behind. And from that point forward, his whole goal was just to get Kim into the courtroom, and then for her to witness him to repent, I guess, so to speak. And I liked it. I liked how it wrapped up. I mean, I don't think it was the strongest episode of the
Yeah.
season, certainly, but it was a nice way to wrap it up. That it wasn't. You weren't going to see this character and this storyline go down in a blaze of
Right.
glory like Breaking Bad did. For all intents and purposes, really, that was when that was the episode where Gus ended up killing Wallow.
Right.
That was that, and then the rest of it really was the drama and how the Jimmy and Kim Wexler storyline was going to resolve.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that this isn't that kind of show to have this big slam bang ending. And we kind of got that earlier on. Like you said, Lalo was that kind of big boogeyman that needed to be defeated. And we got that episode. And for me, actually, my favorite episode of the entire season and maybe of the entire show was the episode after that, when we saw them all kind of dealing with the fallout from Lalo's death and then what
Yeah.
happened to Howard. And that was, for me, the most emotionally satisfying episode of the whole entire season, and like I said, maybe of the whole entire show. And I do think this shows like an appropriate ending for it. And to your point, by the way, this episode was called Saul Gone,
Yeah.
so another pun. So theoretically this is the end of Saul in that his persona anyway. But I felt a little unsatisfied with it, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. And then my wife watched it the following day, and we had like a conversation in the morning. And I think the reason I felt a little unsatisfied with it, and maybe this is the intention, is that I felt like the show was unresolved in the fact that, he's making his penance. He's obviously taking this much worse jail time. He's proving himself to Kim. All those things all make sense to me on paper. But then I think about, he was in exile in Nebraska, and after a year, he was back putting on the Saul suit. And I just picture, like he's in this prison for supposedly 86 years. Like it's a life sentence. I don't know, like 2 years from now, I think he's going to be working a lot of angles. He's going to be a celebrity inside the prison. And he could be like, finagling away to impersonate a prison guard or something and sneaking out in the middle of the night to reunite with Kim. And maybe that's the intention, that for us to believe like, Saul is gone for now, but maybe that's intentional. But for me, it felt a little unfinished. It just didn't feel like it closed the book fully.
I don't know how else you could have really wrapped it up. I mean, other than having the character killed, which was my concern when I
Right.
saw the title of the show. I was like,
Yeah.
oh no,
Yeah.
please tell me that he doesn't die, because one of the things was he was a sympathetic character, even
Right.
though for all of his fallacies, a lot of what he did in the early seasons was really the result of him trying to get respect from Chuck. And you really did feel bad for him. And he was a sympathetic character in that regard, because really all he wanted to do was get the approval of his brother, at least initially.
Right.
And
Yes.
then, Howard offered him the job, but at that point he was like, he wasn't having it. He had already gone down that path towards Saul. He really was sympathetic in certain respects, and you really did see glimpses of that even in the later seasons, where
Yeah.
it really was Kim sort of pushing the
Yeah.
Howard angle, trying to set up the long con on Howard, and Jimmy was like, are you sure you really want to do this? And even when he was in full Saul mode, which
Yeah.
we really only saw in this show bits and pieces of it, which was really smart on the part of Vince Gilligan, because we knew who he was from Breaking Bad. So you didn't need to rehash that. I mean, there were some funny scenes, certainly after the time jump. But if you recall in Breaking Bad, even during Breaking Bad, there was always glimpses of Jimmy within him in Breaking Bad. When Walter and Jesse were doing certain things, he was always like, are you sure you want to do this? And there were certain sympathetic aspects to the Saul character that you could tell that Jimmy was still in there. I mean, I could see how it's unsatisfying. I mean, it's funny that you say that actually, because you're thinking about it also like El Camino, right?
Yes.
When Jesse goes off to Alaska, you
Yep.
felt a little unsatisfied
Right. Yep.
there
Yep.
because it's like, well,
Yep.
what happens to Jesse now?
Yep. Exactly.
He's off in Alaska. You don't, he's not going to break bad again, but it's kind of like you wish you had seen a little bit more of it. And so, it would have been nicer to see a little bit more of the Gene timeline,
Yep.
because that did seem a little bit rushed that he jumped right back into the Saul persona.
Yep.
I mean, I actually thought that he was going to get caught, and I think everybody kind of assumed he was going to get caught, but I thought Kim was going to just show up as his public defender, which I guess wouldn't have been as dramatic.
Yep.
It was very upsetting seeing Kim in Florida, though,
Yeah.
living that mundane
Yes.
life. That was
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yep.
God, that was like a fate worse than death for her,
Right.
you know?
Well, I mean, that's
Uh,
kind of what happened to Gene too, right? So I think it's kind
yeah,
of a parallel there.
but I kind of thought that that was an angle that was possibly happening, and then you and I had been texting, and I said, it seemed weird that she had confessed, and I was like, is this a long con? Is this something that they sort of arranged, and
Right.
when he called her, that sort of triggered her to do that, and are they setting something up? But it ultimately wasn't. It really was face value. She really did confess, and
Yeah.
I thought, there's got to be one last crazy twist to this. So in that regard, I could sort of see where you're coming from, that there wasn't that last big twist that maybe we thought might happen, and that they were still in cahoots in some way, shape, or form. But there were a lot of emotional leading up to it. I mean, a lot of emotional scenes where when she went to his office when he was in full Saul mode to sign the divorce papers. I mean, that was
Yes.
really harsh when he was like,
Yes.
have
Yeah.
a good wife. It was
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
But one funny thing about that is you realize that Kim really was kind of like what set Walter off into the Heisenberg mode, because she was standing with Jesse, and Jesse was like,
You're
is he
right.
any good? And she's
Hmm.
like, when I knew him, he was.
Yep.
And that prompted Jesse to end up, hiring him. And then without Saul, Walter White never really becomes Heisenberg. So it's like Kim really sort of set a lot of this in motion
Without realizing it, right?
without realizing it, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to circle back on what you were saying. And I want to be clear that, by the way, I still think the show is exceptional. And like I said, just to have an episode like that episode, I mean, the episode where Lalo dies is an incredible episode. But then once again, the episode after it, which I just think is one of the greatest episodes of television you'll see ever. Obviously the show's worth it just for that. But, just the things that bothered me a little bit in this finale. One is, you literally have this set up. This is a time machine, right? That's the whole point of this episode, is we're time traveling. And, that's the theme of the whole episode. And then we go back to these very specific moments where his life could have gone in a different direction. But I don't see those moments where he travels back in time that he is coming to any kind of realization. Like, if anything, he's 100% in denial of reality in all of those instances. And I also think about, which also feels kind of unresolved, the fact that, think about his situation with Gene. In the previous episode, he allows himself to get arrested because he can't let that guy go. So there is inside of him the pragmatic, smart survivor Saul, who will do anything to survive. The smart thing for him to do is just walk away, right?
Yeah.
And he is sabotaging himself. He not only gets away with it, then he goes, as soon as he breaks the window, this is not going to plan anymore. And then he kind of gets away with it. The guy would know that someone broke into his house, could be suspicious about the night before, but he's going to be very hard to connect the dots. And then he goes back and he starts drinking the cognac and yada, yada, yada. I mean, like, he desperately wants to get caught. And then when he's about to get caught, he desperately, almost like strangles Carol Burnett to keep him. So there's these two parts of him that are constantly battling. And I don't see in the end how all of a sudden, and now that duality is resolved. Like, I just don't feel they did enough to convince me of that, basically.
That's why I kind of thought it was like some sort of long con, because he's acting very un-Saul-like here when he broke into the house, and then he's just basically, tempting fate to get caught.
Right.
And
exactly.
That sort of didn't make any sense to me. So it's a good point that you raised, because that's what sort of led me to believe, like, is this like some kind of long con, that he wants to get caught now to somehow reconnect with Kim, and
which kind of is what ends up happening, but it doesn't seem like that was the original plan, right? Yeah,
exactly. That wasn't the plan. It was almost like a self-destructive behavior. It was just that I agree with. I kind of didn't understand that. it definitely went against, everything we knew about the character and his capacity for self-preservation. You raise a good point again, because during the whole course of the show, even, you thought like maybe he would even, way back in the beginning, repent when Marco died,
Yep.
remember? And you're like, all right, maybe, he'll set himself. We knew he wouldn't because of the events of Breaking Bad. But if you think about everything that happened to him, like with Chuck committing suicide,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
Howard's death and Marco dying, and, even, his situation with Wallow and walking through the desert with Mike, and nothing really ever brought him around until he realized that Kim, at first I was like, well, maybe he did it because he didn't want Kim to suffer the consequences, but nothing that he did, none of his confession really
Would
impacts
exonerate her.
what will
Yeah,
happen to.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's going to exonerate her. I mean, she's still very much susceptible to civil
Yeah.
litigation from Howard's widow. So, that wasn't even really it. So it's almost like, what prompted. I think it was just something in him finally sort of triggered to get back in her good graces, and that was the one thing that set him straight, was
Yeah.
the fact that he would regain the respect of Kim.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was talking to my wife about it, we were specifically talking about the fact that, first of all, when he walks in, he's got his Saul suit
Yep.
on, right? He's fully Saul again. And he walks in and he's about to do that whole thing, interrupt the judge and everything. And when he sits down, under his breath, he says, "It's showtime."
Yep.
And then after he does that whole entire confession, he turns around and looks at Kim, and Kim gives him like this half smile. And it's like all
Yeah.
this was for that. But it did cost him the rest of his life in prison. So
Yeah.
it's, that's a big price to pay for that. So
Exactly. Exactly. You can see that it's like, of all things, like, okay, finally switched, but it was like the last 20 minutes of the entire series. But listen, I mean, it's a phenomenal show.
yep.
I put it right up there with Breaking Bad. I actually, now I want to go back and watch all of Breaking Bad again.
Yeah, I am going to do that. Actually, I've never done the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back and watch the whole thing, and then I want to go back and watch Better Call Saul again. But
Yeah.
I have so many other shows I gotta watch.
There's
that
so
I
many
don't
more
have
things to watch. Yeah.
so many things I want to watch that it's like I don't know if I can go back and sit through it all. But great scene also with Walter in the
Oh, yes.
bunker,
Yep.
with the disappearers bunker.
hmm
That was great, and that was like vintage Walter White.
Yep.
When he was
Yep.
like disgusted with Saul, like,
Yep.
what are you talking about? Time travel is not possible. Like, it's just so Walter.
Yep.
At the height, well, not the height, but like the downfall of Heisenberg. But that was great. That was a great scene.
Yeah. Great to see him back in that mode again as well.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing too, the flashback with Chuck, that actually took place before the pilot of Better Call Saul, because in the pilot of Better Call Saul, when he delivers the groceries to Chuck, he has the Financial Times. And in this episode, that flashback, he said they don't carry the Financial Times yet at the newsstand, but hopefully tomorrow they will.
Wow.
So from a timing sequence, that scene actually took place theoretically the day before the events of the pilot episode.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. We discussed all the way at the beginning when we were discussing Saul in the first half of this season. We're obviously open to changing your opinion in the future, especially after a revisit.
Yeah.
But your gut instinct now, just given the totality of the show, would you put this ahead of Breaking Bad or no?
No.
Me neither.
I would say though it's close, but it's
Yeah.
Breaking Bad is still ahead of it, but I'd certainly put it way up there. I mean, in my opinion, it's probably in my top 5 dramas of all time. I would put it maybe behind. I would say maybe Breaking Bad, The Wire, and Better Call Saul are my top 3. Granted, this is like almost blasphemy because I live in New Jersey and so do you, but I've actually never seen The Sopranos, so
You've
I
never seen
can't.
Sopranos? Oh wow, wow!
Never seen The Sopranos.
Wow.
I know. That's certainly up there. But for me personally, I would say Breaking Bad, The Wire, and Better Call Saul, the top 3. But I'd have to say Breaking Bad still is ahead of Better Call Saul. And I think part of it too is because it's recency bias. So while we're watching Better Call Saul, we're like, this is better than Breaking Bad. But it's a different show. I mean, even though it takes place in the same universe, it's much more of a drama. It's much more. You've got the Breaking Bad aspect of it, with Mike and Wallow and Gus and all that. But that wrapped up in the first half, and so it was kind of like it's a combination Breaking Bad and then drama.
Yeah.
But Breaking Bad is, in my opinion, one of a show that's almost infallible in terms of there's really no episodes that stunk. Maybe The Fly, but that's about it.
I like the Fly episode, by the way, although that was just a budget saving. on that case.
Exactly. A bottle episode.
Exactly. Intentionally, they're like, we have very little money left, and we
Yeah,
need
well,
another episode.
That was like in the days, like in the earlier days of AMC, when AMC also, like with The Walking Dead, like in the second season when everything took place on Herschel's farm.
Yes,
it's like, oh my God, this is like, horrendous because they didn't have money to spend on the episodes. So
that's a total digression, and we'll probably have to switch over to the She-Hulk conversation now that Ray's with us. But the Walking Dead, but every single year they were always battling them for budget, and they were spending a huge amount of money on Mad Men, for example. And I'm like, Mad Men, which I think is a great show, by the way, but it's like they could get any budget they wanted, and they were fighting with the Walking Dead every year about their budget. I'm like, The Walking Dead, like 100 million people are watching the show. You guys are making money hand over fist, and you're nickel diming them, like firing showrunners every year. It's like, it was ridiculous how they treated that show. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's not a good show, by the way. It's not a good show after season 1. But
season 1 was the only good season. Yeah, exactly. I actually thought that like Walking Dead was like a dream taking place in Rick's mind. Like I thought he was in a coma, but then obviously it's not because he's not on the show anymore. But was it Frank Darabont? Didn't he? Is it Darabont?
Yes. Yep.
He fired him. Quit it. He quit because he's like, you guys aren't giving me any money. Right. That second season was so bad.
Yeah.
So it was the same episode.
They're like, it's the biggest season we've had. It's the biggest show we've ever had by a mile. They're like, let's just stick them on the farm for the whole show. Like,
it was basically an entire season of bottle episodes. Horrible. No. Horrible.
So here's that music segment I mentioned at the top of the episode. And we're just going to change gears a little bit and talk about 2 truly iconic artists before getting back into the conversation with Nick, and now Ray joining the conversation as well. In last week's musical segment, Ian added this song, Girl Loves Me, by David Bowie, from his final album, Black Star, and challenged me to correlate it to my most recent entry, State Trooper, from Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska album. And I'm not sure I made a connection here or the correct connection, but the pleasure of this exercise is to do some research and find these parallels between these artists. This song, Girl Loves Me, influenced by contemporary rappers such as Future, features lyrics directly referencing Clockwork Orange, Anthony Burgess's classic dystopian, post-apocalyptic, perhaps, novel, which was of course made into a movie as well, very successful film by Stanley Kubrick in 1971. But that didn't seem to be a connection between these artists, but they do have interesting parallel biographies. David Bowie, born David Jones, formed a band back in 1962 when he was just 15 years old. And he always took it very seriously. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to make an impact on the world, and always found that the artists he was working with, these bands that he formed, no one else was really taking things as seriously as he was. And then in 1963, he saw the Beatles, and he aggressively began trying to jump on this new revival of music in the UK to become a worldwide star. This led him to much experimentation and a lot of really, really bad novelty songs throughout the 60s. He was able to keep getting record contracts because after the Beatles, everybody was looking for the next big thing, and no one really knew what it might be. So they were willing to give him a chance, but nothing really hit. Meanwhile, Beatlemania didn't hit the United States until 1964, where 15-year-old Bruce Springsteen watched them perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, and immediately decided to go out and buy himself a guitar and teach himself how to play it. And throughout the mid to late 60s, he played with many New Jersey rock and roll acts down in the Asbury Park burgeoning musical scene, as well as playing in New York City, and all the energy that was coming from the pre-punk movement that was beginning there, where bands like Suicide and the Ramones were playing weekly at dive bars and little by little creating a new musical genre. Meanwhile, while Springsteen was mingling with this burgeoning rock and roll revival that was happening in New York, David Bowie had come to the United States to investigate this new art scene in New York City led by Andy Warhol, and he saw the Velvet Underground perform, as well as an elaborate presentation directed and orchestrated by Andy Warhol himself. And this theatrical blend of music and image became the template for most of Bowie's remaining career. He immediately began to work on music that would lead him to international stardom, beginning in 1969 with another arguably novelty track meant to capitalize on the Apollo moon launch.
This is ground control to Major
This became a #1 hit song in England and a huge hit on album-oriented rock stations in the US, and still may be Bowie's most recognizable track. Most British critics who had been following his career thought this would be a one-hit wonder, and he was soon to exit the stage right. But that was not to be the case, and after failing with his next album, The Man Who Sold the World, who nonetheless contained some of his later iconic tracks, he hit pay dirt first with the album Hunky Dory, which made relatively few ripples in the UK, but eventually would go on to sell millions of copies, piggybacking on the phenomena that was to be his most iconic theatrical persona, Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy played for time, jiving us that we were voodoo. The kids would just crash.
And at this moment, he was channeling the art rock of the Velvet Underground and the raw punk energy that he had seen in the Ramones and Iggy Pop.
Freak out in a moon age daydream, oh yeah. Don't fake it, baby.
At the same time, Springsteen had been signed to a record deal, and in 1973, the culmination of that year and a half of recording led to him releasing 2 albums, Greetings from Asbury Park,
Yeah, she was blinded by the light. Oh, cut loose like a deuce, another runner in the night.
and The Wild, The Innocent, and The E Street Shuffle. David Bowie had heard these albums, despite the fact that they did not gain any kind of mainstream success, and he actually decided that he'd like to cover a couple of tracks from the album. And let's hear Bruce tell the story himself.
David, I don't know if people know it, but he supported our music way, way, way back in the very, very beginning. 1973, he rang me up and I visited him down in Philly while he was making the Young Americans record. And he covered some of my music, Hard to Be a Saint in the City and growing up, and he was a big supporter of ours, particularly when I took the Greyhound bus down to Philadelphia. That's how early it was. But anyway, we're thinking of him.
Springsteen continued to build a critical reputation for his live performances as well as the albums themselves, and he spent well over a year recording his next album. Bowie, meanwhile, was very busy, churning out oftentimes at least 2 records a year, and in 1975, Bowie finally released the album for which he was planning to record and release the Springsteen cover.
Skin like leather and the diamond hard loop of a cobra. I was born blue and weathered. I burst just like a supernova. I could walk like Brando.
A cover that he did not include until a special edition years later, for the fact that Springsteen himself did not seem to appreciate the overly theatrical interpretation of the song.
My hair slick sweet, silver stars on my duds just like a Harley heat. When I struck down the street, I could hear its heartbeat. The sisters fell back and said.
And in 1975, Born to Run, Springsteen's first iconic album, was released, rocketing to number 3 on the charts. The song Born to Run only made it to 23 on the pop charts. 10th Avenue Freeze Out only to 83, but many tracks on this album, including Thunder Road as well, became perennial hits on album-oriented rock. And Springsteen embarked on a world tour on the success of this album in the United States, and amazingly appeared on Time magazine and Newsweek magazine simultaneously on their cover. The first time anyone's ever done that.
Come on with me, trance like us. Baby, we were born to
Which was to say that he had achieved this kind of critical consensus that he was the next big thing in rock and roll. He was here to save rock and roll, ironically in the midst of the emergence of punk rock. Although Bowie's covers from that first album, Greetings from Asbury Park, were never actually released, not for many years actually. Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann was released as a single and went all the way to number 1. And as I mentioned last week, Springsteen also had penned huge hits for Patti Smith and the Pointer Sisters. Meanwhile, 75 was a watershed year for Bowie as well, especially in the United States, as he had his first top 10 hits. Fame went all the way to number 1 from Young Americans. And Station to Station, 2 albums in the same year, yielded Golden Years, a top 10 hit as well. Bowie then made a trilogy of albums, Low, Heroes, and Lodger, in Berlin, considered the Berlin Trilogy, produced by Brian Eno from Roxy Music, who would go on to become an iconic producer for U2 and other bands throughout the 80s, as well as, in many ways, creating ambient music, and heavily influenced by the minimalist electronic music of Kraftwerk. And indirectly New York City's Suicide as well. This trilogy of albums is maybe the high point for Bowie's creativity and his most influential music, influencing the multicultural post-punk music of the Talking Heads and other new wave bands, and simultaneously a cornerstone to the electronic music and goth music that would be popularized throughout England in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, influencing bands like New Order, Bauhaus, The Cure, and Depeche Mode, just to name a few. But at this moment, Bowie felt like he had been left out of the popular movement of the British musical scene, where Bowie fans, and Bowie himself, being critical of artists like Gary Newman, who had had huge chart success in the UK, imitating Bowie in Bowie's own estimation. So with these influential albums that nonetheless yield iconic tracks that are still held up as some of his best today, even popularly, but did not score hits at the time, he decided to move into an aggressively more pop-oriented direction. His goal was to recapture the worldwide audience that had embraced him on his Ziggy Stardust. And he went back into the studio to record Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This recording session led to the number 1 UK hit, Ashes to Ashes, a sequel to his first number 1, Space Oddity, along with the top 5 hit Fashion, his ironic fashion/fascist hit. Both rock radio hits in the United States, but did not make the pop charts. But interestingly, during this recording session, someone else was in the same recording studio trying to score their first crossover pop hit. The session musician who played the piano for this album was Roy Bittan, who, in the same studio at the exact same time, was recording with Bruce Springsteen for his album The River. So that means that this distorted piano line in Ashes to Ashes,
ashes to ash and funk to funk it, we know Major Tom's a junkie, strung out in heaven's high, hitting an all-time low.
was played by the same person who played this iconic piano line in Hungry Heart. As I've mentioned previously, following up on the international pop success of Hungry Heart, Springsteen actually decided to move into a less popular direction and created the hugely influential, stripped-down bedroom folk album, Nebraska. But brewing in those recording sessions was the beginnings of an international phenomena. Speaking of which, Bowie had scored his first #1 in the UK in quite a few years, but was still dead set on taking over the international music charts and focus mostly on the United States, where he continued to struggle to score a top 10 hit. But he was about to have a string of huge hits all over the world, beginning with his collaboration with Queen. And then, in 1983, culminating with Let's Dance. A song that swept the world, the album eventually going on to sell some 13 million albums and continuing to spin out hit singles.
Look at my China girl.
His string of top 10s ended in 1985, and of course, not to be outdone, Springsteen would release the even more hugely influential and popular Born in the USA. An album that would spin out 7 top 10 hits, an unmatched success throughout 84 and 85.
Hey there, baby, I could use just a little help. You can't start a fire right for the door. I'm going out, I don't know this whole world is out there just trying to score. I've seen enough, I don't wanna see anymore. Cover me. Did he go and leave you all alone? I got a bad desire.
Of course, neither of these artists would ever achieve this kind of success again, and their careers would slowly peter out popularly. Bowie continued to chase popular trends to lesser and lesser commercial success throughout the 80s, and then really had a relatively quiet 90s. Springsteen intentionally moved away from his more popular sound, but still, for a period of time, scored top 10 hits, and also had relatively quiet 90s. Both artists re-emerged in the 2000s, Springsteen coming back after the September 11th attacks with his very successful Rising album, and became a huge touring phenomena throughout the rest of his career, which continues to this day, while Bowie became an elder statesman to art rockers of the post-grunge era, from Nine Inch Nails to Arcade Fire to LCD Sound System. And that leads us to January of 2016, where Bowie shockingly passed away, and the posthumous release of the album immediately on the heels of that announcement led his album to be a huge success around the world, and of course leads to the Springsteen cover that I played last week in memorial to Bowie's passing. Just 1 week after Bowie's death, Dale Griffin from Mott the Hoople, for which Bowie had written their biggest hit, died from Alzheimer's disease. Just 2 months after that, one of the Beatles' most influential collaborators, George Martin, died of natural causes at the age of 90. And just 1 month after that, another hugely influential, gender-bending artist of the 80s, Prince, died of a fentanyl overdose. Alan Vega, the lead singer of Suicide and a big influence on both Bowie and Springsteen, would die in New York City that summer. And this is just some of the notable deaths in this period of time, which included the death of George Michael by the end of this same year, 2016. So that's just a little history of this paralleling career, these two artists who achieved international phenomenon status in almost the exact same period of time, within about a year of each other, who had a mutual appreciation, although they worked in very different genres, who became hugely influential to other artists in the future. I mean, they've both been covered by the Arcade Fire, for example, just to name one. And both artists that embrace the theatricality of rock and roll, embracing the storytelling potential of rock and roll, especially in their early years. So to circle all the way back, my connection here is that cover, that meetup in 1973 between Bowie and Springsteen, and the failed cover experiment that Bowie had. But I have a feeling that I missed the connection here. I think I was led by Ian a clue about a video game. I am not a video gamer, so I do not know what this connection might be, and my research did not turn up anything. But I'm sure he will be able to shed some light on my speculation this week. As far as my new addition to this musical daisy chain, I'm going to de-escalate, hopefully, these perhaps overly convoluted connections between these artists and go with something that's relatively straightforward. If you're familiar with these two artists, you probably know this connection already. But the track I have selected is Original Sin by In Excess. In Excess had a resurgence in attention this year due to the use of the album Kick in a very memorable episode of Euphoria, Season 2. But I'm going back to one of their earlier albums for a very specific reason.
Dream on, white boy, dream on, black girl, then wake up to a brand new day, to find your dreams are washed away.
So, can you figure it out? Are you an In Excess fan? Are you a Bowie fan? Do you know the connection? Drop me an email at needsomeintroduction@gmail.com if you'd like to play along, and we'll get Ian's response next week.
There was a time when I did not care.
More and more eccentric superhumans are coming out of the woodwork. We're going to launch a division for them. And I want the She-Hulk to be the face of it.
Jennifer Waters. Namaste.
I have a serious conflict of interest. This man tried to kill my cousin, Bruce.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
Oh. People only care because I'm representing Emil Blonsky.
I think they care because they're like, hey, that girl's green.
Jen, do your thing.
Okay, so next topic. We got Ray, bringing Ray into the conversation. I got two things I want to talk about. One is a conversation about She-Hulk, which I have many things to say, surprisingly, because I did not think I'd have anything to say about the show, but I have many things to say about it. Some are positive, some are very negative. And the other thing I wanted to run by you guys is, the big announcement a couple weeks ago of the new, all the MCU, the entire MCU slate. So I definitely wanted to get, especially Ray's feel for the shape of this thing to come. We've been complaining about phase 4. Turns out phase 4 is nothing but introducing new characters, which is basically all we've been getting. And then, phase 5 has a pretty rigid structure, which I think the fans will be more happy about. But given the titles and the characters they're introducing, just to see if Ray has any speculation on what direction the MCU is going in. But before that, we can jump in and talk about this first episode. Only one episode's available of She-Hulk so far. And I have pretty brief review here. I thought the comedy worked really well. I like the performer. I thought she was really good. I know her from Orphan Black. She's already an Emmy winning, I believe, actress. So she's definitely high quality. And loved seeing Mark Ruffalo having a lot of fun in this role. I love him talking about what him and Tony Stark were doing during the blip. All that stuff is great. Those are my positives. That's basically what I felt. And I think that at this moment, I would watch more of this show, but I can imagine in a few episodes not wanting to watch any more of this. But it really depends on what happens in the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was a fun ride. It was entertaining. It was definitely entertaining. I think it captured the comics of She-Hulk. I mean, She-Hulk was always sort of a different little variety. It wasn't quite as serious as some of the other comics. I mean, I'll admit I didn't read a lot of it. I mean, I think she came around the time of the Secret War. You know, it's interesting. There was a lot of things that went on in the comic that actually happened even during the actual presentation. Have a little bit of breaking that fourth door when they both look at the audience.
Yeah.
That was in the comics. They used to do that in the comics sometimes. So that was classic She-Hulk action. So
I've heard it described as a PG-13 Deadpool. So kind of that.
Yes. Yeah, for at the time. And the comics would do that, like sort of let you in on, the secret behind the wall kind. And they did that at one point. And Sydney, my daughter, was watching. She goes, "What are they doing right now? They're staring at us."
Exactly.
They're giving us a wink, basically. Yeah. So they had that villain Titania at the end there. That was interesting because she's like she's kind of like an anti-hero. She's not really a villain, kind of one of those alternate Avengers kind of characters, but she definitely is She-Hulk's rival in the comics. So I guess we'll be seeing more of her as the series goes on. But sort of random, she just shows up in that courtroom. But I thought they kept the spirit of She-Hulk, and it was definitely entertaining. It was very light.
Yep.
And the downside, I'd say, is everyone keeps talking about this. It's another situation where she masters. Nick said it too. Masters being a Hulk in one episode and just being on a Mexico resort retreat of Bruce Banner's. But actually, the comic was kind of like that too.
Right.
I don't remember her like losing anger issues, and she always was just because of her physiology. That's how they explained it away.
Right. She
was able to handle being the Hulk different than Bruce did.
Right.
So I don't know. It was an interesting twist. I mean, I think the original comic, I think it was an actual blood transfusion that she got from Bruce Banner that turned her into, not just that incidental contact with the blood and the open wound or whatever. But
that was a criticism I have, by the way, of just how that works, is that if it's that simple, and he seems to be aware that the risk is there. I mean, someone would have weaponized him a long time ago. You could make an army of Hulks if they wanted to.
You could have some of the Chitauri could have turned into Hulk during the first Avengers, probably, right? I mean, come on. How many times is spill some blood there, But
I guess he doesn't bleed when he's the Hulk, so it's just because he was suppressed, right? But still, it should be doable, right?
Yep, or even on Sakaar. So, I actually enjoyed it. I just went along for the ride. I mean, some of the visual effects were a little odd.
Yeah, a little dodgy, but I forgive it because the show is not that serious, so I'm okay with it. So.
Yeah. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. You guys summarized it pretty succinctly. I agree. I really did like the explanation of Bruce being with Tony during the blip.
Yeah, I loved all that stuff.
I thought that was really cool, and he seemed a little melancholy about Tony not being around anymore. I like that,
and just being drunk the whole time when he had to build the
exactly
tiki, place all by himself.
Exactly, and I thought the comedy worked well.
Yeah.
It was light. It was enjoyable. I did very much like it. I have my own negatives, but we'll get into that. But I did enjoy it very much. And I think I'd mentioned to you guys that of all the shows, I will say, and this might just be because, we're dealing with an original Avenger from phases 1 through 3 or whatever. But I would say that this is my second favorite show behind Loki.
Yeah. I agree.
Just because, we have a familiar character. Mm-hmm. We're exploring more about, Smart Hulk and now it remains to be seen how much Mark Ruffalo and the Hulk are going to be in this. I would imagine that they will be because of the Sicarian spacecraft. So there's going to be something going on there.
Yeah, they're definitely. I mean, they paid for him to come in, so I'm pretty certain he's back. He may not be in every episode, but he's definitely back multiple times. And I mean, they also have Daredevil coming. They have Abomination coming.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot of other MCU in there.
So I like the linkage to to the again throwback to the first 3 phases. So that was cool. But I think, like both of you said, it was an enjoyable show.
Yeah,
I liked watching it. I'm looking forward to watching it next week. And unlike some of the more recent Marvel programs that we've seen that was it's been more of a slog to try to get through them.
Like Moon Knight, call it again.
I don't ever need to see that show again. I really don't.
I got some bad news for you, by the way, and Ray probably knows about this, but in October, I mentioned they have a Halloween special that they've been keeping under wraps, but apparently it's already leaked out. It's Gail Bernal is playing Manwolf. Is that what it's called?
Something like that. Yeah.
And apparently this is like the horror faction of the MCU, which means that supposedly we're supposed to see by the end of that, he may have like a teaser where he teams up with Moon Knight. So there could be.
God. I might have to pass on that one. I might not be on the podcast for that series.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's only 2 episodes, It's like a 2-night event or something. So it could be short enough to maybe be worth.
And it's not like I'm opposed to the new characters. I have to say, like, I really liked America Chavez in Doctor Strange. I thought she was an awesome character. Miss Marvel, for instance, like, that was, it was okay. It was fine at the beginning, but I got kind of sick of it at the end. I ended up just plowing through the last 3 episodes and I was like, like whatever, take that or leave it. So, some of the new characters are great. I think I'm going to like this She-Hulk character, notwithstanding some of the issues I had with the show. I think the actress is great and the character so far is a lot of fun.
Yes, she's very likable. You like what she's showed so far, and you care. There's some empathy, actually. There's some actual soul put into one of these MCU shows.
Yeah.
So
I'm surprised. I'm actually happy that you guys have that reaction to some of the internet. This toxic internet culture has been like really lambasting it for the thing that I will criticize the show for. And I don't have an issue, for example, like when she says, "Oh, Bruce, you're trying to tell me that I have to pretend that I'm not angry all the time." And she's like, as my co-host Sona can tell you, she has multiple stories on the podcast where she talks about how, as a female lawyer, you have to kind of sit there while, you're being mansplained in the courtroom, like the things you know better than they do. So that's a completely sympathetic perspective that she's saying, hey, I mastered this skill a very long time ago. That I can totally buy. The thing that I have a bigger problem with is that physically, hey, I'm just naturally gifted at this. I'm like, fine. Even Michael Jordan wasn't like, the best basketball player for a few years. And Hulk's been at this for a decade now. So the idea that she could just like a weekend away with Bruce, she's like mastered everything. I'm like, come on. Like I'm not even talking about it from being like even like some kind of like feminist statement or something. I'm just thinking it's like lazy writing. It's like, we want to cut to the chase. So we're just going to give her all the skills day one. It's like, wouldn't that be, for me, that's the funny part of the show. Like the fact that she's like, I got this. And maybe by the way, the show will prove me wrong, that maybe she's like, I got this all under control, because that's the type of person she is. And then she does start to accidentally Hulk out in the courtroom, because for me, that's the funny part of the show. That's the comedy. So maybe they'll prove me wrong and they'll actually do that. But at this moment, I was kind of like, what? Like she could just do everything day one? What are you talking about?
Yeah, we have another Mary Sue. We have another Ray here, So it's just like the sequels, the Star Wars sequels all over again. We're doing Jedi mind tricks. We're doing this before we've been taught on anything. Force healing someone, all that.
Yeah, this is that I agree. That's one of the things that concern me, and it has nothing to do with the fact of the feminine side of it. Has nothing to do with it, but I agree with you both completely. We're starting to get into the realm of, and I don't want to. Victor's going to start laughing because we're starting to get into the realm
the
now.
Star Wars talk again.
The sequel trilogy, where all of a sudden the writers are in the room and they're like, "All right, we're in a corner here. All right, I have an idea. Let's like make the Jedi like have some sort of special power that they never had before,
right?
And create something out of thin air. Like let's say Leia will fly through space. When we were kids, the Jedi were able to control things with their mind and lift stuff. That was it, and use their lightsabers. So we're starting to now see this in the MCU where I don't like that. I think I agree with both of you. I think it's kind of lazy writing. I think they could have gotten around that, but maybe doing a time jump or something where it was something like a year, like 1 year later, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And at least like there's some amount of time that's gone by where she's been able to, sort of hone her Hulk skills.
Right.
The other thing is like Hulk, Thanos was the only one that defeated him.
Right.
Right. And now like she's been a Hulk for like a day and she's kicking his ass, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
wait a second. Like, are you kidding me? This is Hulk. This is Hulk, man. You know, so and again, it has nothing to do with the fact that the character's a woman. It's just any other, you know,
right.
You would not see
if this
that.
was his teenage. I feel exactly. I was thinking about this before. It's like if this was like, you know, some teenage millennial, you know, bratty cousin of his that he happened to transfuse his blood into, and then all of a sudden this kid is like day one kicking his ass at everything, I would be like, what are you talking about? That's just like, you know, and I feel the same way. It's just like, and I don't even understand why to even make that decision, to be honest with you, because like I said, the much funnier option is for her to be like, I've done my training, Yoda. I'm going to go off on my own. And it turns out she's not as good at all this shit as she thought she was.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she hulks out in the courtroom. She accidentally, you know, hulks out in the middle of a date, which I think is actually going to happen over the course of the show. And if that's the case, then set it up that way. Why even have this whole, like, I'm the master of all these powers? Because if she really is going to be like the best Hulk imaginable day one, this is not going to be a very fun show at all. Like, the comedy comes from her screwing up, right?
Right. Definitely. I agree. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see how they run with it, you know. I did like the post-credit scene. That was great.
Oh, about Captain America? Did he?
And they, you know, they set it up in the credits with those cartoons because they had the one diagram with Steve Rogers and the arrows, and I'm like, that's it. I don't remember them. Like I said, I don't remember them talking about that. And then sure enough, boom, then it comes up as a post-credit scene. I'm like, oh, there you go. So that's what they were talking about Steve Rogers being a virgin and all that stuff.
Yes, that's so funny. Yeah. And of course, they cut her off right when the show would probably get up.
That's good. That was good.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, Nick, you know, they did retcon the whole Jedi, you know, heal force power. They said they outlawed it like hundreds of years ago because it would tempt them to the dark side.
Oh no, we can't go with the Star Wars, but we can't go with the Star Wars.
I know.
That's why nobody knew how to do Jedi force heal. Yes,
it's ridiculous. It's like they're sitting in a room and they're like, all right, what do we do? Like, it's like if there was like a 10th movie, they'd be like, all right, now we're gonna let the Jedi can turn into water, and you know, like the one of the Wonder Twins, you know, and form like an ice shield or so. It was ridiculous. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. Like, hopefully they don't, you know, the MCU doesn't go there. Interesting thing, by the way, about Steve Rogers, I read this. The character apparently that he lost his virginity to is that woman at the USO show that it's the same actress that played Star-Lord's mom in Guardians of the Galaxy. So they're saying that was actually Peter Quill's grandmother.
Oh, okay. All right.
So theoretically, then Peter Quill's mom may have been sired by Captain America. So Captain America may have actually been Peter Quill's grandfather. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. You know. I don't think that's true, but that's that's the rumors that are circulating now.
All those connections, man. You gotta have all those connections.
But that would explain why he was able to hold an Infinity Stone beyond the fact because I mean he held it because what's it called? Ego. Yeah, Ego was his dad, but that would explain why, though, the light was able to stay within him because he had not only Ego's power, but he also is genetically related to Captain America.
Yeah, who knows? It's true. Makes sense. He's even more of a super being then, right?
Yeah.
But, all right, so let me transition over to this massive announcement of, my God, like, you know, mind-numbingly. I think even I might be burning out on all this MCU stuff, although it does make me curious. And I especially want to get Nick, your enthusiasm for these projects, but of course, Ray, because you're more familiar with these characters themselves. So we're very close to the end of this phase 4. We have apparently the I Am Groot kids show, which I've not watched any of, is part of this phase 4. Have you seen it? Did you say, Ray? No. So then we have that Halloween special, which is apparently Man-Wolf or whatever that, or I'm sorry, Werewolf by Night.
Yes.
And and apparently he may turn up in the Blade movie. He may team up with Moon Knight in the future. So that's how it could potentially be used further down if they decide to use them at all. There's so many other characters, who knows?
Wasn't Man-Wolf a show like when we were kids in the 80s?
Yeah, I think I'm confusing it. They're all sounds. It all sounds the same.
That's like Teen Wolf, right?
No, there was actually a show. There was actually a show called Man-Wolf or something like that.
It's a very similar premise, I think, to this one because he like turns into a werewolf, you know, like kind of against his will. So I think it's a similar setup.
Man-Wolf. Oh my God. We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel
We
here.
really are, man. Really.
Can they just get the Fantastic Four already or something?
Oh my God. Well, I get around to that. That's still a ways off. And then we have the Black Panther Wakanda Forever movie, which I'm very curious about. Obviously, we lost Black Panther, so I'm not sure how they're going to square the circle here. I'm actually more interested in there's going to be a Wakanda TV series, and I think that's going to be interesting because there's such a the technology and everything they introduced there in that movie is very interesting setup. I just, once again, I'm not sure how they're going to pull this off with this movie. You know, the lead character theoretically is missing, unfortunately, of course. But then we wrap things up finally with the Guardians Galaxy Holiday Special, which I think is a spoof of the old Star Wars holiday special.
Star Wars again, yes.
Yep.
I'm telling you, that's so funny that you said that. It's true, right?
Right? Wasn't there were like a bunch of Wookiees in that? And
oh my God, you have to track this down.
Like,
you can only see it on YouTube.
baby Chewbacca's and stuff.
You must watch this. It's
insane. You never saw it, dude?
I think when I was a kid, I did. I kind of remember it though.
It's so bad, and they have Harrison Ford's in it. They actually have Harrison.
They're all in there. They're all in there. It's it was on ABC or one of these like network shows, and I do remember watching it. I mean, you can find it on YouTube. And it was at the time I was probably like 9 or 8 or something. I probably thought it was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, my memories of it were, I actually remembered seeing it. Like
it was a Wookiee, was it some kind of life holiday, which, basically Christmas.
Yes, you're right. It was like the Chewbacca or the Wookiee crazy. Life holiday or something like that.
And they had the Boba Fett cartoon, and then their tooth thrown in. So it's all funny stuff. I think the MCU is trying to gear up towards some of the bigger movies now.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, it's, again, I'm glad that they came out and just said there's no culmination. They're all just intros in this phase 4 because it was very random. I think the Fantastic Four is the one that has the most mystery behind it. Like, what are they really going to do with Fantastic Four? Are they going to use John Krasinski, or did they just do that for fan service and kill them off from Earth 813 or whatever that one is, 838, and that's it? That was his little stint as. And again, it's Reed Richards, so that would be interesting. The other I've heard with Johnny Storm. Who is Johnny Storm, and do they bring back the original Johnny Storm?
who was Chris Evans, right? Yeah,
because it's another multiverse thing. So you could have Chris Evans come back.
Yeah, potentially.
Johnny Storm. Look, I didn't mind that original Fantastic Four. With Jessica Alba, I didn't think it was that bad. I really did. I didn't think it was that bad. Probably the Doom character was the one that didn't really match with my ideal about Doom, but that's one of the big villains. And obviously they're going to start using Kang now.
Yeah. So let me give you the rundown. Here's the rundown. Check this out. This is an insane amount of content. So this multiverse saga, as they call it, begins in February 2023 with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which of course features Kang for the first time officially.
Right.
Then in May, we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 with all the players there. Not sure how that's going to tie into the Quantum, but I'm sure they will tie it in somehow. Mm-hmm. Then the Secret Invasion series comes around the same time in 2023 as well. The Marvels comes in July. So now we have all 3 Marvels in a movie together. Mm-hmm. Sometime in the summer, Echo, who we met in the Hawkeye show, will come back with her own series. Also in the summer, Loki. We'll have our second season of Loki finally. And then next November, right in time for holiday, or right after Halloween, I should say, we have the Blade movie with Mahershala Ali playing, which should be very good. He's an excellent actor.
Yeah.
At around the same time, Ironheart. So we get the Ironheart series as well. And then we also have an Agatha Coven of Chaos series. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have the Daredevil Reborn series coming in 2024. So now we're already in 2024. Amazing. The next Captain America is coming in 2024 as well. The Thunderbolts that summer. Yep, the Thunderbolts that summer. And then in phase 6, we would expect to see Fantastic Four. They finally come, and that's scheduled for November of 2024. And then we have another Deadpool movie. We have, what else we have here? So many other things. We have Spider-Man. Armor Wars. Armor Wars is coming in 2024. Yep. We have Shang-Chi Part 2 coming then. We have a new Spider-Man movie. Not sure if that will tie into this or not.
Yep.
And then in 2025, we have Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, and then 6 months later, Avengers Secret Wars. And that's in 2025. So that is a whole lot of stuff coming in the next 2 years, or 3 years. I'm sorry, 3 years. But that is a whole huge amount of content. That's just insane.
Yep. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think the Thunderbolts will be interesting too, because the Ross character they can't use unless they CGI him the whole time, and he was going to be Red Hulk. So no Red Hulk. They might go with Abomination instead as a larger character in that host of sort of anti-heroes.
Oh wait, so Thunderbolt becomes Red Hulk in the comics?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I think they were probably building to that. And then when William Hurt passed away, they're going to have to get it inventive again. And MCU varies anyway from the comics, so they
could get another character to slot in there.
Yeah, they can make it up. So it's a very aggressive schedule. I remember with the Star Wars, they kind of released a similar timeline with pictures and everything, and and you can see how a lot of those shows have now totally going by the wayside, whether actresses got fired or people lost interest, I mean, so, you wonder how many of these will come to fruition. So
I think most of them will, for the fact that, I mean, they literally start shooting these movies
they're in production ahead
of time. So like most of what we would see up until 2025 is currently in production right now. I mean, as a matter of fact, it was funny because I was trying to put together another conversation I was thinking about having with you guys, was what the coronavirus did to the scheduling of all of the MCU products. And for example, they were shooting the WandaVision and Captain America and Winter Soldier and Loki pretty much all at the exact same time. So they were originally going to come in with Captain America first, a more traditional kind of action, then WandaVision, then Loki. So Loki really came out in the same slot, more or less where it would have been, but they were shooting that like in 2019 for like and Loki theoretically would not have come out pretty much when it did come out, which is a year and a half later. So this stuff is all in production. Like this stuff is all in production right now. So this is like most of this stuff, they almost are like locked in loaded. They really can't make a lot of changes from that schedule, which is what kind of screwed things up with the coronavirus. Yeah.
I know there's pictures online about Loki too.
Yes.
And also Ironheart. Yeah, there's Ironheart pictures released already too. So they're definitely, like you said, they're definitely in production halfway through that schedule. So
I don't know anything about the Ironheart character, but is that Tony's daughter? Is that
no? It's like it's like an MIT student in the comics. She steals some of Stark's technology and kind of improves it. And then in that comic arc, Tony Stark's still alive and sort of helps her out. Like there's no actual relationship with Tony Stark other than, there's this random orphan girl that, goes to MIT and she's super smart. And, it wasn't
the rumor is on that.
Yeah, what's that?
The rumor is on that show, by the way.
What? No. What's that? Oh.
The rumor on that show is that apparently Robert Downey Jr. wants to come back to the series, but it's not. He doesn't want to do the full commitment to these.
Maybe be an AI or something.
Exactly, that she's going to inherit his, and he's going to basically be the Jarvis voice for her with the same sarcastic Tony Stark persona, and so that brings him back into the MCU voice wise, anyway. So.
But in the comics, there's a lot of support from Wakanda, Siri, and the Ironheart thing. So I'm sure it's another. I don't want to bash women, but it's like two women getting together. Her and Siri probably be the same age, and it's just gonna be all. I don't know. I feel bad for Scott Lang. He's gonna be like the only guy left in the whole MCU. Him and Loki would be the only two men left in the whole MCU.
You still got Captain America and Deadpool and Shang-Chi and
you still have Thor.
There's a lot of guys. Spider-Man, they're still in there.
I mean, do you think that Thor's coming back, right, in the Avengers? I'd have to imagine, right?
I'm pretty sure Thor's coming back. I mean, I don't know what his contract
arc
is
done.
like. No, I don't think his arc is done. I mean, the way they left things at the end, she's definitely going to come back as one of these young Avengers. So he's definitely going to be in there. Once again, I know these guys are burning out from being locked in for these contracts for so long, but I'm pretty sure that like they did for Robert Downey Jr., you let him come in and have like 2 or 3 big scenes in someone else's movie, and they'll stick around. They're going to collect like a $5 million paycheck for 2 scenes. Like they're not going to turn that down, you know. If they're going to have to do it for, you know, when you think about like Benedict Cumberbatch, when you think about the production schedule for that, where they shoot for like 6 months, then they put the movie together, then they come back and they like schedule another 4 months. It's like, how do you even, like, he has to like basically fit a movie in between the other 2 movies, and then they maybe bring him in for a cameo in another movie, and maybe like in the Avengers movie. It's like, it's crazy. It's like a crazy schedule for these people. But I think you bring him, you come in and you do like a cameo, or like when Tony Stark, literally they set him up in his house, like this booth where he put his head inside of the 3D scanner to be inside the suit, and he would just record in his house and make a whole Iron Man movie in his house, right? So it's like that's all you need. Like these guys can stick around as long as they accommodate them. So
yeah, I mean, John Krasinski did like 1 day or 2 days.
Exactly.
That was it. You know, and the suit was all CGI. It wasn't even a material, Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards suit. So, you know, it's interesting times for the MCU. So, and this at least is a nice, refreshing series, I think, the She-Hulk.
Yeah, I agree. It's not so 100% agree with that. It was actually just an enjoyable show to watch and sit back and relax and enjoy it. Hey, I actually had a question for you guys. So Abomination obviously is in this show.
Yep.
As we know.
Right.
But he had that cameo scene in Shang-Chi with Wong. Are we going to see Wong in this show? Like,
I think Wong's in it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I saw a preview, like he actually seeks her counsel or something almost. So I was wondering if it might have something to do between him and Strange about who's actually Sorcerer Supreme and things like that. You know, like some kind of legal battle with the maybe he hires her, you know, to help on that or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, speaking of stitching these things together, I was literally listening to a different podcast where they were mentioning him specifically. And it's like, you know, Benjamin Wong, they've like, I don't know if they just have him like, because they're shooting, you know, in Atlanta on these sets collectively, that he's shooting like all these kind of stitched together scenes. He shows up in Shang-Chi, he shows up in the Doctor Strange movie, he shows up in, you know, like he's in everywhere. He shows up
in everything.
The Spider-Man movie, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, you know, he's in everything. And I think that they basically just say, hey, can you come in, like walk down the street to the other set? We need you for like a scene. We need you for a scene. And he's just like, I'm still here. Yeah, you just use me where you need me.
Just make a portal disappear. You know,
he probably makes $1 million for each one of those cameos. So I'm like, hey, good for you, man.
I got to get a gig in this MCU somehow.
Hey, anybody, exactly.
You know, I wouldn't mind. I would have been like pizza. What was it? Pizza Papa. I could be Pizza Papa.
Bruce Campbell, right? That's Bruce Campbell. Right?
Yeah. I would have taken I'd take any scene. That would be great.
Yeah, it's like a retirement fund.
Right.
I still like the idea of Stan Lee being one of the watchers during all those movies.
Yeah.
You know, it's still a good idea. I like that theory. They should have went with that 100%. Well, it's good stuff. It's all good stuff.
One more thing is that I was not planning to do the Star Wars thing. I was not going to do Andor, but now they moved it. They moved it to the end of September. So now I'm like, well, maybe, you know, it's end of September. Maybe I'll be back in the mood to check out another Star Wars show.
I thought the trailer was awesome. I mean,
I've heard really good.
Yeah, that's going to be good. I think Cassian. What is his name?
Cassian Andor.
Yeah, Cassian Andor. That's a great character. I mean, Rogue One is probably the most successful. That and Mandalorian, obviously, are the two most successful and probably the two best things they put out. Everything else has basically been shit.
They're re-releasing Rogue One in the theaters before Andor comes in.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably go see it.
It'd be a good way to refresh everybody's memory on that.
Right. Yeah. I'm still hoping that they somehow retcon and they get rid of they put the trilogy, the sequel trilogy into like an alternate universe.
No,
somehow.
That's not gonna happen. They can't do that. I don't think they alternate universes. I get that.
The world was the world behind the doors or the world behind the world, you know, the Star Wars Rebels things that it can happen. They did it with Ahsoka. They can do it again. I'm telling you. Do it again. Look,
I can't even sit through that last movie.
See, now I'm going to get into it again. I mean, you have two main. I figured this out. There's two main characters in Star Wars, right? So Padme basically just dies because she's sad. Okay,
yeah,
really strong. You know that even in Obi-Wan, how he's saying how strong her mom was. And she dies because she's sad.
Yep.
And then of course Luke dies because he's tired. You know, like it's like, come on. You can't come up with better demises for some of
They
these
got bad. They
characters?
got bad DNA, bad genes.
Come on. You know,
Leia died because she was tired.
Yeah,
she died in real life too. I mean, but
yes,
but but no, her character died the same way that Luke did. Because remember, she used all of her energy to go see her son.
Yes. Yeah.
But then here's the other thing. All right.
Oh no.
Well, how does Han Solo show up?
Yes.
In the I mean, come on.
He's not a Jedi.
What is going on here?
Well, yeah, that's another thing. I know. And of all the characters, the one that hates Star Wars the most makes a cameo appearance as a Force ghost, and he's not even a Jedi. I mean,
yes.
I saw a funny thing about Han Solo that was funny is it was Darth Vader's perspective on his future son-in-law, right? So you say, who is this MF? He shows up with two of the droids that I knew. One I built when I was a kid. The other one was my astromech when I was Anakin, right? Comes in to save my daughter, brings my son. Oh, and by the way, brings my rival Jedi to the Death Star with him. All these things. Who is this guy? Oh, on top of it all, he's the only one that can shoot me out of the sky in A New Hope, right? So Han Solo was like the foil to Vader, actually, if you think about it. He's the one who ruins Vader's day, really. If it wasn't for Han Solo, nothing happens, right? So that's why I think Han Solo has some kind of Force sensitivity. He just calls it luck. You know, could be a Jedi himself.
It could be. Maybe that's how he retconned this whole thing.
Yeah,
we need another solo movie. We need another solo movie to find out that he has midichlorians. He's got midichlorians too.
I mean, the thing about the prequel,
come on.
Yeah, the prequel trilogy was obviously bad, but in retrospect and in comparison to the sequel trilogy, it was like, you know,
now it's great.
It was like the greatest movie.
At least they were trying. They were trying.
Yeah. But you know, like some of the issues with the prequel trilogy was like that whole thing that you said, like everything was just too interconnected. Like, like didn't he recognize R2-D2 at any point? Like, hey, wait a minute, that's R2. Oh shit, that's C-3PO. I built him when I was a slave on Tatooine.
That's the idea in the scene in An Empire Strikes Back, where Boba Fett goes to fire and he pushes down his blaster because he's going to fire at Chewie because C-3PO is on his backpack at that point. So some people say he does that on purpose because he doesn't want him to destroy C-3PO in that scene. That's a retcon on that.
I just want to warn you guys, by the way, that the Zoom is going to end. It's going to end in a minute and a half. And I just want to let you know that it's not me hanging up on you guys during your Star Wars stuff.
It's probably appropriate. It's good. It's a Star Wars safety valve.
I don't think Victor and I have had one podcast where I didn't go into
about Star Wars.
Bitch about Star Wars.
I need, you know what? Maybe the week before Andor comes on, I'll just have one episode where you guys just get to get this all out, vent your spleen, and hopefully to like exercise the rest of these episodes.
I'm telling you though, the best thing is
exorcism is seance. Just get it all out, man.
I'm telling you, the best stuff I've ever watched on this is the Red Letter Media stuff with Mr. Plinkett. Mr. Plinkett's reviews, hilarious.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely hilarious.
I think that the whole series never recovered from that ever.
Nope. All right, boys.
All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks
Sounds good.
for the conversation. We will talk
all right. Thanks.
soon.
All right.
Supposed to be with you.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Have a good weekend.
See ya.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
The answer to a higher power. Our universe is on the edge of a precipice.
I am a lawyer. We do things by the book.
The Book of Ashanti.
No, the Book of American laws.